Vocabulary. It's what you need when your solos start to feel too basic. Like maybe you can get through the solo, but you're just playing the melody like almost verbatim, or it just doesn't sound tasteful, or it just doesn't feel right. So if you're having these problems, it's probably time for you to start working on vocabulary. But the way that most people learn vocabulary is they go, I found a lick on Instagram, I found a lick on YouTube, I found a lick in a book, I maybe even transcribed a solo. And when I try to play it in my solos, it doesn't come out right, or it's locked behind bars, I just forget it, or it just like doesn't flow, or it just doesn't feel right. And that mostly has to do with how we practice vocabulary. So the most common approach to how people practice vocabulary is they go learn a lick, and then they just play it by themselves, right? In complete isolation. And then they go and they just try to shove it into a solo. And it comes out kind of stilted, it comes out kind of weird, it doesn't flow. And so then they beat themselves up for playing it wrong, which they just kind of punish themselves for it. And then whenever it comes up again in their head, they hear it in their head, they just kind of avoid it, because there's this thing that happens where when something doesn't flow, we naturally avoid playing it. So it totally makes sense, if that's how you practice, that your phrases would never get into your playing, because you kind of create this loop where you punish new phrases, okay? And in order to fix this, we really have to start to think of vocabulary like language, okay? So this used to happen to me when I was in, like the 8th grade or something like that. We had these vocabulary quizzes with all these big words like superabundance, right? And somebody in my class, in our daily conversation at the lunch table, would say like, oh, I have a superabundance of ketchup on my burger, or something like that. Something that just like, it doesn't make sense to use it in that context, and it just sounded awkward when they used it, right? And vocabulary is a lot like this, where if we try to shove it in, it's kind of awkward. What makes it really work, just like when you really understand a word, is you know it so well, and you know what it means, and how to use it in different contexts, that it just kind of naturally comes out in your natural expression day to day. And this is really how we want to practice. So I want to lay out now a practice method that kind of lends itself to that method of learning like language, okay? It's 3 steps. The first step is you do want to pick a phrase. So wherever that comes from, today I've got a Kenny Washington phrase that I learned from one of his solos. It just goes like this. And you notice with that phrase, it's really short. That's the best thing to do when you're doing vocabulary. If you do some like 8-bar phrase and try to play it specifically, it's just too much to remember, and then it'll be hard to use it in context. So choose something short. This is like a bar or two, Okay, now the next step is we want to take it and we want to make it our own and be able to use it in a lot of different contexts. To do that, I like to use this analogy that I call molding like clay. That's step 2. And it's like, I used to, mold clay with my sister, and I would as soon as I grabbed the clay, I would make a snake, and then make a dinosaur, and then make a hat, right? And she would just still be there sitting, playing with the clay. She'd be molding it around in her hands, just feeling it and touching it. And I was like, what are you doing over there, right? And she's like, I'm just seeing what it wants to be, right? And that's how you want to think of your vocabulary, is you want to just move it around, play it upside down, play it backwards, play it inside out. Really just let yourself be free and creative. Don't try to make it into a solo yet. Don't try to fit it over a song. Just see how many different ways you can play it. So, for example, with this Kenny Washington phrase, I can play it around the drums different ways. Right? That gives me some ideas. I can lengthen the first part of it. Right? That gives me some more ideas. I can lengthen the second part of it. Right? That gives me some cool ideas. And so already I have more flexible ways than just this one way to play it that I have to try with all my might to remember and then just shove into a solo, right? And this is really important, because what it lets you do is it allows you to phrase. It allows you to take one piece of vocab and use it in all sorts of different sentences. And by the way, in this video we're mostly talking about vocab. If you really want to be a complete jazz musician, you're going to have to work on vocab, phrasing, you got to know tunes, you got to have good techniques so that these ideas come out, and you got to know how to play with people. And so if you're really trying to do that, you're trying to become a complete jazz musician this year, then I highly recommend you reach out and apply for mentorship, because that's what I work on with my students. We cover all of those things. So if you're interested in that, there should be a link in the description. You can reach out, you can get more information, and we can get in touch. Now, once you're done with phase 2, molding it like clay, the next step is gonna seem counterintuitive, okay? So usually most people would go and they would try to shove this into a solo, but really what that does is it tenses you up and it makes you overthink, and then the idea doesn't come out. So we spent all the time getting the phrase comfortable. It's internalized, it's a part of us. So phase 3 is to just play a solo, okay? Just play a trading 4, or play a 32 bar solo or a 12 bar solo, and don't even think about the phrase, just let it come out if it comes out. And just trust that since you put all the hard work in molding it like clay and getting it comfortable playing the idea, that's gonna pay off and it's gonna come out naturally, okay? I'm gonna play a solo right now. I don't know what's gonna come out. Maybe that idea will come out, maybe it won't. We'll see. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. So boom, you see in that solo that I played a bunch of ideas, everything flowed. The idea did come out, but I played it in different ways. Sometimes I played it long, sometimes I played it short, sometimes I played it at the beginning of the phrase, sometimes I played it at the end of the phrase. And that's really how you know that you know a piece of vocab well. Just like if you learn a word, you can use it in all sorts of different contexts. So if you do this right, not only will you play cool vocab, but it'll come out smooth, it'll sound good, it'll feel good. So if you found this video interesting, I highly recommend you check out my video that's how to play longer solos without getting lost in the form. I'll see you on the flippy flop.